This is the second foundation session. This session is a response, this kind of session is a response to your request. Every year, at the end of the pre-conference Sunday, we hold a business meeting, and we do ask the membership, what is it of the knowledge and innovation interest group? What is it that you would like to have in the program that you don't have currently? And one of the answers we got 2 years ago, someone said, you know, there are great ideas on which our research and interest are built. And one of the things we would like to have, Jeannie, is to really get close to the people behind the ideas, so we can get to know the person, we can understand better the life of the idea, the fullness of the intellectual edifice on which we are building. So what we've done here is we brought you close to the person behind the idea, and hopefully after this session you would feel closer to the idea as well. I want to acknowledge the work that Martin and Aline have done preparing this session. This session, as you may have noticed, especially those of you in the interest group, has two parts. So one part is this presentation, the conversation first. But the second one is the interaction with the audience, and they have collected questions from the audience, and they're going to use that to moderate the question and answer part. So you're here to hear them and to hear Rob. So without further ado, thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabriel. Okay. First of all, thanks all of you for being here this morning. Very early, I know. So great that you all came here. We have a pleasure here that Rob Grant is here with us to discuss his view on the knowledge-based view of the firm. It was very interesting to look into it, and we're very happy to have you here with us, Rob.
Thank you.
So before we continue, we have a quick look at Rob's life. And Rob's life starts with, even though he's currently at Bocconi University, actually his background, as we found out, is very international. So he received his education in the UK, and then he held many positions in Europe and North America. He had a number of major academic publications. The major ones focus on the resource-based view of the firm and the knowledge-based view of the firm. And today we will be focusing on the latest two publications, which are about the knowledge-based view of the firm, because they received the most citations. A really impressive number, to be honest. To structure this in a nice way, we will first look at the past, so what is the origin of the knowledge-based view of the firm. Then we go to the present, so what is the current position and what are the relations to other theories. And then we talk about the future, research and practice. At each part, we have grouped the questions that you submitted before the session together, that we will discuss with Rob Grant. And if you have any other questions, please raise your hand, and we can have a nice discussion here. The aim of this session is to be quite informal, so please don't hesitate to interrupt us and to participate actively in this session. Well, first, what is the definition of the knowledge-based view? And we went back to the original article, which says the idea that the primary role of the firm and the essence of organizational capability is the integration of individual specialized knowledge. And now the question that we got from the audience for Rob is, do you still agree with this definition?
Well, more or less. I think in a way it's a little bit too narrow. I mean, it focuses very much on integration, whereas of knowledge, where it is, the firm also is a context within which knowledge is created as well. I guess I find that it's a bit of a difficulty of actually coming to any definition, because this is a view. So I would say that this is a pre-theory. It is it's much more a perspective on the firm. So I think actually drawing any boundaries around it is kind of quite a difficult thing to do. But I think I would probably change that somewhat and say that it was much more a perspective on the firm which focuses upon the role of knowledge within the firm. I think that would be both broader and a bit more concise.
And we already have one question from the audience there.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing a lot of practical research relating to how these type of networks emerge,
Yeah.
especially ecosystems,
Yeah.
which are then having a focal company as the one which is organizing resources.
Yeah.
And to me, this is actually showing why we don't have so much focus on the individual firm anymore, because the ecosystem is actually the way today, with increased accessibility and reduced cost of transactions and so on, the unit of analysis has expanded from the individual firm to become more focused on the network.
Okay, so let's amend this. This is no longer a knowledge-based view of the firm. This is a knowledge-based view of economic organization.
I totally agree.
Okay, all right. I'd be happy to go along with that. No, that's a good observation.
Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Charlotte Glaser from the Stockholm School of Economics. And to me, I think I would have a different definition. I would base it on the most referred version of the knowledge-based view of the firm, that is Kugut-Sander.
Mm-hmm.
And then it recites three important things in that definition. It's knowledge, and it's innovation, and the combinatory capabilities of the individual and the firm to combine those two.
Okay.
So tradition and development. But knowing is what is ongoing firm, and innovation is what may be new in the firm or elsewhere in the industry. Mm-hmm. And it's important to recite with human beings. And that's fuzzy. So I think that's important to say where does these things sit within the individual or in the firm, industry, both, or three.
Okay.
Okay, so in your opinion, you would say the addition be a broader context for the definition?
Yeah, I think so. I like that notion that maybe the firm is a little bit narrow here.
Okay. And then we went to the past of the knowledge-based view, and we simply looked at the impact of the two publications. And to be honest, it's very impressive. So what we did is we counted the number of citations, and you see that from 1998 it continues to rise. In 2010 it reached its peak, but it might even go higher this year, because if you look at the number of citations in 2012, it's already pretty high. Have you ever expected that these two articles would be so widely cited?
No.
So it came as a full surprise there. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and so it doesn't seem like the end is even in sight, that it will continue to be cited a lot more over the future.
There's a lot of inertia in these things. You know, there's a lot of inertia, particularly in citation practices. So, I mean, you know, as we all, you know, we cite stuff because we see that as part of the stream on which we're building, although, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're drawing anything from those citations.
Okay, and so what we also did is we analyzed the articles based on the articles that you cite. And what we have here is a graph which shows the articles, the more common articles that you cite, and how they're related to one another. Okay. So what we have here is the publications, and then to what extent they also cite these publications, so it gives a kind of a network feeling to it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if you actually try to cluster them, because this is a very nice image, but it doesn't show the full image. So if you look at, there's a part about organizational complexity, there's a part about behavioral theory of the firm, there's a large part about theory of economic organization, the resource-based view of the firm is coming back, innovation studies, industrial organization, and then later knowledge management.
Yeah.
You cited all these theories, but that doesn't mean that you build also upon them. Maybe you want to distinguish yourself from these. So which of the theories would you say you have incorporated in the knowledge-based view of the firm?
Okay, so my starting point was very much the resource-based view. I mean, in the early 90s, I think we were in the strategy area making the shift from the external environment, the Porter type analysis, all struggling at how we could use game theory and how we could bring it into our teaching and bring it into our research, and shifting over, I think, very much to recognizing that superior performance is primarily due to competitive advantage, and competitive advantage primarily resides within the firm. So I think that was where myself, I think many other people were coming from at this time. And but then I think what we also had was this, on the reaction side, there was this feeling that, particularly for those of us who come from economics, of feeling very dissatisfied with the microeconomic theory of the firm, particularly that which had come from the Coasian tradition and transaction costs, agency theory, and so on. The feeling that this was not providing us with what we needed in order to build strategy upon. So I think that was the, I think that was one of the feelings that I think a number of us had at that time. And so I think that we were looking for something else. And I think out of some of the work on innovation, on knowledge, on information, being able to see that there was this commonality there, particularly when we looked at some of the epistemological work on the role of tacit knowledge. So I think, and I think that was that seeing that opportunity. And I think the key spark for me, I think, was this was the Demsetz article, the Theory of the Firm Revisited, which there's a lot of stuff in that. But there's one, and it's like several paragraphs where Demsetz talks about the efficiency of markets is when the knowledge which is embodied in the product is not required for the use of the product. And I thought, talk about vertical markets. And I think that was a real, I think with everything we do, there's certain things that trigger light coming on. And I thought, well, this is the first clear articulation I've seen of principles of the boundaries of the firm, which is not dependent upon transaction costs. And I think that was what I think, and I think several other people I think have influenced by that idea of Demsetz. And I think that really I think sort of got me going on saying, okay, so building on the resource-based view, building on the stuff that's been written on knowledge, maybe we can write something that's fairly sort of simple about a basis for the existence of the firm, which is not dependent upon transaction costs, to articulate something about the boundaries of the firm, but also tell us something about the internal organization of the firm, about the relationship between one firm and another firm that you alluded to in your comments, and also I think back to what you were saying about the Kogut and Zander. Kogut and Zander had written about these higher level organizing principles. I think was the term that they used, and actually had to be a little bit more specific about what was going on here, because I think a lot of the problem with the knowledge-based stuff that was written, a hell of a lot of it was pretty abstract. A lot of it was deeply based upon the philosophical tradition that we see in epistemology, and I think that's I think where I saw, well, this is all too complicated here. I think we can do something that's relatively simple here. So that was the long answer.
This is very clear. So basically, you took all the theories, you took the good parts that you thought were connected, and that's how the knowledge-based view came around.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, I mean, all this is sort of like, this is, what I'm doing here is integrating a number of ideas that were around at the time, and I think presenting it in a fairly simple and clear way. And I think, and I think the reason for the citations is I think people could understand what's written there, and I think a lot of the problem of what's written about knowledge is that either it's vague or it's so deeply based upon the epistemological tradition that you have to read it many times. Anna.
I'm 5 minutes late, so I apologize. The point has been really great. I mean, I think that the question that was collected, my name is Aline Gatignon from University for Harvard, is that I am definitely in agreement and among those who were dissatisfied of the explanation of the term only in terms of transaction costs. However,
Well, I think as in all theory, there's a trade-off between the simplicity and capacity from that simplicity to to readily come up with predictions, and the reality of the theory. And clearly, all theories of the firm which are based upon a simple concept like transaction costs or knowledge, are going to be limited. But I guess my preference has always been for having theories that are simple rather than complex, even if they do not accurately reflect the reality on the basis of just simple usefulness. So I guess that's my approach.
Okay.
I think that this is interesting. You do the clustering and spend effort doing that. At the Stockholm School of Economics, we would be very unhappy with this picture. We are clustered, and it's based on Hedlund, and it's pre-90s. Just you know Gunnar.
Yeah.
Gunnar is in heaven, hopefully, with his summit people. And Gunnar collaborated with Anaka, and Anaka grew out of Kugut Sander. Kugut was a PhD. He presented in 1991 his doctoral thesis on the emission of knowledge. So we would like to see that in the same group. And he partnered with Kugut in 92, 93, 96 are the most referred papers. And they would be very, very unhappy being here today if they call resource-based view and that they grew out of that. We actually grew out of the knowledge management. And that's where I continued and developed my knowing and innovating theory of the firm. So I think clustering is good if you really see the dynamics. And there's one person I really miss here, and his team, and that is, what should I say, co-petition from Denmark, and Nikolai Foss. He's written a lot in innovation studies and knowledge management and debated Kugut Sander. So in the future, I'd be very happy to see them in here. They're extremely productive.
I would certainly be very happy to see Gunnar Hedlund there. And I'm sorry he's not here to be with us today.
I'm sorry, that's what the software provided. So let's go to the next picture, and that is the influence of the paper. And so what we did is the 25 most famous articles that cite your work. And what's very interesting is we see a number of big names over there, and the first four, Spender, Szulanski, Grant, and Tsoukas, are all in the same special issue of SMJ on the knowledge and the firm. So the first question that we got from the audience is, you were the co-editor of the SMJ special issue. What has been the impact of that special issue? And do you think it would still be possible to publish such a special issue on the KBV nowadays?
Well, the first reason why you can't publish it now is that no journal would ever give us the freedom that myself and JC Spender had in terms of managing and selecting. I mean, basically, we more or less were the reviewers and editors for that. The whole thing was done in a very short time. That we've been talking to Dan Schendel for a while about having a special issue, and then all of a sudden there was one that had been arranged and was basically was cancelled, and so this slot came up, and there was a very short piece of time for putting this together. And one of the consequences of that is we had a lot of freedom, and I think that freedom actually allowed us to avoid all the kinds of problems that you have with academic publishing now. Papers going to reviewers who don't appreciate what the paper is about, and that whole process. If you start off with a paper which is fairly clear and integrated, but by the time it comes out of the reviewing process, it's had to incorporate so many different views that it loses its coherence. So I think that this special issue that I was sort of checking, I think it is the most cited issue of any SMJ issue. So I think that so where am I going on this? So I think that the actual process is going to be, it will be different now, and I think for good or bad. I think for us at this issue it was good. But I think the other phenomenon is, I think this whole notion of the knowledge-based view I see it as something which came in a period of time, was very useful, this perspective, in drawing together a whole set of themes which were occurring at that time, and to say, between the study of innovation, of management of technology, new product development, information systems, organizational learning, that all these areas which were very much the separate themes, there was this commonality. They were all dealing with a common phenomenon of knowledge. They're all dealing with aspects of knowledge, and some of those basic characteristics of knowledge were such that you could actually look at these in their entirety. Now, I think that was something that was there in the mid-90s. Now I think the field has maybe developed. Well, it has developed. It's developed tremendously. But I think it's developed so we've got specific streams. So I think this notion of saying this is about knowledge would no longer work. I think now, research, you may deploy concepts of knowledge and knowledge-based view, but it's about particular kinds of phenomena that research is going. So I don't think it would be. I can't conceive of how you would put something together on that single theme so easily as what could be done then.
So no more such special issues today, unfortunately.
I don't think. Well, there will be, but I think they're going to be much more on particular particular phenomena, on innovation, on maybe knowledge-based approaches to organization design, those kinds of on strategic alliances, on networks of firms which are going to deploying some of these principles and ideas.
Okay, and then the next question that we got is, your article is not the only article in the special issue of SMJ. There were also articles by Gabriel Szulanski and Sukas. So in what sense are they similar and in what sense are they different?
Well, I think the Spender and Sukas articles, they I think are very much related to the epistemological tradition. These are looking about what is the nature of knowledge, what is the nature of knowledge as socially embedded phenomena, what is the role of the firm as social organizations. So I think these are dealing with these quite very extremely difficult questions about what is knowledge, what does it mean to know. So I think those are on that one particular side. My paper is very much looking at saying, well, how can we create the basis for a theory of the firm using concepts of knowledge? And Gabriel's paper, which actually I think was probably the best paper of that issue, I think was really I see this as a real breakthrough paper and a sort of, I think, a model for research that can be done in strategic management today. It was taking a managerial phenomenon which was extremely important. How do you transfer best practices within the firm? And it was using a case study methodology, but it was using a case study methodology using multiple cases, multiple instances, multiple cases within those each company case, so that you had a basis for quantitative analysis, and came up with results that were important from a theoretical point of view of the issues which surround the transfer of knowledge, but had really important practical implications. So I think if we could have more papers which had those characteristics, our field would be greatly enriched, and Strategic Management Journal would be a hell of a lot more interesting journal to read every month.
Okay. Well, thanks for all the answers.
Yeah.
I think you're addressing something important, but you really don't see something very important you put in your definition for a special issue. So if you go down back to your first slide, can you do that? I think you have a whole topic for a brand new theme issue. And what Kovet, Sander, and doesn't address, and what Nikolai strongly disagree with, is what you have in here. And it's the second part of your sentence. the integration of individual specialized knowledge, and you add individuals. And that's what we don't see in these older theories, and what makes the human being act of knowledge and innovation, and how is it realized in firms. And the institutional setting, I only heard a brief discussion at the Schumpeter conference in '96 by Krugert. He was asked to give an institutional discussion, and then he wrote a little bit in a later book, Institutions and Options. So I think if you start, and you especially soon go back and say, you know, how does this happen, individual and the community, where it happens, the association, the firm, it could be very interesting.
Okay.
This makes a big difference what you're saying.
Okay, so now we discussed the past, the impact of the article, the sources that were used, the ideas where it came from, and the impact that it had on the future, on the subsequent articles. And now Aline is going to talk about where do we stand at the moment with the knowledge-based view.
So a lot of your questions have actually had a lot to do with what the knowledge-based view can bring to us in the present and how it relates. So we took a lot of your questions that were asking about how the knowledge-based view relates to a lot of research streams that we're working on today, such as TC information processing, RBV and dynamic capabilities, but also things like networks, people, processes, routines, teams. And so what we did is basically we took all these questions when we had a really, really interesting discussion with Rob about how we saw all of these. And we sort of put together an X-ray of his mind for you.
Wow.
As most X-rays, it's maybe a bit difficult to read. So maybe we'll spend some time sort of trying to decipher it together. But as you can see, one of the questions that was also raised at the beginning of the session was about the relationship with TC. And you've talked a little bit about this when we discussed the past, and how your view of the knowledge-based view of the firm sort of developed as a reaction to TC and maybe some ideas of information processing. And I was wondering if you could sort of tell us a little bit more about that. As you can see in this mind map that we've put together, we have this opposition sort of represented by a red arrow, so there's this sort of distance from it. Can you comment a little bit more on that?
Sorry, what's the red arrow? Where's that? Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Maybe it should have been a big red arrow.
All right. So I think the notion of basing a view of the firm on knowledge rather than transaction costs, I would say that what this does, it recognises, the point that was made by, I think very clearly by the Kogut and Sander in their 1992 article, that the problem with the transaction cost view is this assumption. It's so founded in microeconomics, and it's assuming that economic activity is about transactions, whereas what Kogut and Sander recognise is that markets and firms are doing different things. That markets are about transactions, firms are about production. That the purpose of the firm is to transform inputs into outputs. And the essence of this transformation process is using knowledge in this. So that I think what we've got here then is the basis of a theory of the firm, which then allows us to use that notion and to say, okay, now we've got a better basis for actually understanding what's going on in the firm and relating to issues like the organization design, competitive advantage, strategy formulation. So that I think is what distinguishes and makes this approach to the firm a more productive one. Yep. than the transaction cost economics, which in a way I don't think takes us very far in terms of helping us understand what firms are doing to be able to theorize about issues such as strategy, structure, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had a fairly strong point as well in our discussions, which was sort of distancing the knowledge-based view as well from information processing, and it's sort of in the same vein as what you're saying now about transactions and markets. You made this distinction between processing information and actually creating knowledge, and all the different units of analysis within that can be found.
Yeah. So the information approach, I think is very much based upon notions of explicit knowledge, that knowledge can be transmitted in terms of information, the key really to the knowledge-based view is recognizing that the most valuable knowledge is tacit knowledge, and this is what creates this. The reason why we need to have firms, information processing can take place incredibly efficiently across markets. But where you have deeply embedded knowledge, deeply embedded in individuals, this is where the social context of the firm, where administrative mechanisms, and all these phenomena, routines, directives, authority, this is the word that can allow the firm, it gives its efficiency and meaning in terms of engaging in productive tasks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think where has been a key point in terms of our discussions, because a lot of the questions you asked were about how does the knowledge-based view relate to all the work that we've been doing on, say, alliances, on processing. You've asked questions about how this relates to individuals. There are questions about teams, networks, and so we sort of, when we put together this X-ray and thought about everything you told us, what you seemed to be saying was that, in a way, these were all units within which we could find knowledge being developed, being shared, being transmitted, being created. And so what it seemed like you were telling us was that all these units of knowledge were what we should be looking at in terms of trying to understand what kinds of organizational design principles should be created for understanding how knowledge is developed and shared. Can you comment that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think that special issue was putting together, I think, this view that knowledge is something that we can build on in terms of viewing the firm, viewing alliances, viewing innovation, a lot of those things. Now I feel the key is to look at real phenomena of particular organizational forms. The firm and its boundaries, I guess is one aspect. Looking within the firm to look at the role of teams. What is it that makes, what kinds of production processes are teams, and what kinds of structures of teams are valuable in terms of being the productive activities that they're fulfilling. The whole structure of firms, the design of firms, the nature of hierarchy. I think what the knowledge-based view allows is a very different view on this. And I think I think if we take all those things in organization theory, Lawrence and Lors and their differentiation and integration, the nature of hierarchy. I think what we have with the knowledge-based view is a much different understanding of that, and in particular, one which looks much less at issues of the role of authority in terms of achieving cooperation, and much more to the massively neglected side of organization theory and organization design, that of coordination. And and I think what the knowledge-based view has allowed is to pick up where Thompson left off in 1968 or whenever he wrote his book, and actually start addressing those issues of coordination within firms, which are, I think, much more important and interesting than the ones that have dominated both economics, which is about, they focus upon cooperation and the role of agency and so on, and the same with with traditional sociology-based organization theory, which has looked at issues of goal alignment and some of those phenomena. So I think that the real value of the knowledge-based approach is that I think it's kind of allowed organization theory to get back on track and to deal with really useful concepts, such as the role of modularity within firms, and so a very different, I think, sort of notion of the role of hierarchy within organizations, to be able to address issues about how what's the degree of loose coupling within organizations? Where do you need tight integration, and where can you have modularity with standard interfaces? Some of these are key, shall I say, key issues of organization design, and I think sort of and actually to penetrate issues of competitive advantage as well, particularly I would say with the role of organizational capabilities. So I think the key with this has been to bring the knowledge-based view down and say, let's start looking at phenomena that we can really identify, measure, and explore, whether it's organization capabilities, whether it's organization structure, whether it's joint ventures, alliances, networks, and so on.
Yeah, we've tried to depict sort of this real close link between issues of organizational design in particular and really real-world applications of these, and the managerial implications as well, which are strong. I think I saw a few questions about the links, some of these links we've drawn here. You had a question?
Or maybe someone else before me.
Does anybody else have a question about this?
I have. I have a question, I have a statement. My question is this narrowly red arrow, what does that mean?
So this was precisely showing sort of the distance that Rob sort of showed between the emergence of the knowledge-based view and the whole stream of literature that was dealing with transaction cost economics, information processing.
A lot of stuff going in organization and design to get low, and where is TC? Where did you? I mean, I think this is. I don't understand it as far as.
Right.
I understand what you said, but when you did draw this picture, it would be interesting to know why you made it that. What did you think?
So the idea is that this is what Rob was thinking. So maybe he'll be.
I think it's about the distinction. I think it's talking about the distinction between those two.
The big arrow going to the globe and the red one sort of going to. If you meant what you explained to us, or was there any other interesting thought behind it?
Not really. No, I don't think so.
So it is intriguing.
I think you're looking for more than's there, actually.
Yeah, because it's actually there are a number of Nobel Prizes laying behind what you said to stress how important this is with the firm. And you had Herbert Simon, and he trained, of course, March, and these people in the 60s at Carnegie Mellon. That's where Oliver Williamson happened to be, and he got a Nobel Prize, and he discussed this in Stockholm when he got that 3 years ago. And the tutor of Udo Sander at Berkeley was Oliver Williamson, and they broke. So this is the breach being depicted actually by a PhD and a professor at Berkeley. And Oliver Williamson, when he got a Nobel Prize, Udo was very nervous because he's in the Royal Academy of Science in Sweden. But Williamson said in his laureate speech that he needed to criticize himself, and in that way he acknowledged what you've been doing in the knowledge-based view of the firm, and he said we had minusculous views over the firm is. And we really need to size up to what a real-world idea of a firm is. And he said that 3 years ago. So there should be plenty of work to do in a special issue.
Okay. So Rob, would you say that the knowledge-based view of the firm is complementary with transaction cost economics, or is it an alternative?
I would say that in terms of predictions, mostly, it would be difficult to distinguish them on a predictive basis. So I would say that it's mainly, I think, well, I think it's both. It's both a substitute and complementary relationship.
Well, I think you rightly depicted very early on the classic view of economists' view of markets as being things that trade products. And you said products contain economics. And to what extent do you think that actually that is either a fair description? Because firms trade much more than products.
Yeah.
And markets, I mean, the view of markets only being about products then leaves the gap for the knowledge-based view. Yeah. But if all trade between firms is markets, which is one view then firms trade much more than products. They change knowledge and all kinds of things, and some alliances come into this. So to what extent do you think the knowledge-based view is really different from or just complementary to other kinds of thoughts in economics and other fields about this field? Can you sort of elaborate a bit on that? Because I mean, you know, going back to transaction cost economics view, if it's just about products, you're right. Knowledge-based view would really add something different. But if, in fact, the economists have thought for a long time about trading other things other than products.
Yeah, well, and I mean, to a great extent, what we're seeing is that what is traded is, you know, is not knowledge itself. You know, it's knowledge which is embodied in intellectual property. It's knowledge that's embodied in people. So people are being traded. It's knowledge embodied in machines and so on. And you know, and economics can give us a lot of insight into that. You know, I think particularly in terms of the issues of uncertainty and information problems, and to appreciate, you know, why these markets are going to be imperfect. But I still think that this does not then really help us that much in terms of and I think it's on that basis it can say, well, why it can give us a sort of a knowledge-based view for the existence of the firm, which is based upon transaction costs issues of informational problems and so on. But again, I think that in terms of being able to address the kinds of things that we're interested in strategy, you know, I think that you know, it's not going to take us that far. And I think that what a knowledge-based view allows us to do is to really get some insight into some of these issues. And still, I think, you know, there are, I think, you know, areas which we still have not gone, you know, far enough in. So I think, you know, if we take another, I think, approach which has allowed us tremendous insight into the internal organisation, into the strategies of firms, you know, another would be complexity theory, and in particular the applications of NK modelling. Well, again, I think, you know, that is taking quite a different approach to the knowledge-based view. It's saying that what firms are about is not so much this process of integrating knowledge for production purposes. It's all about search. It's very heavily based, and I think, you know, getting back to the Carnegie School, you know, this role of search processes is the way that the firm is conceptualized, and this view of the firm in its fitness landscape of searching for fitness peaks. You know, it's a somewhat different view of what firms are about. And again, I think that if we could get a little bit more integration of the knowledge-based views of the firm engaged in transformational processes, I think with some of these notions of complexity, I think there's a way forward there. You know, I think one of the most influential articles I've read that I found sort of useful was the one in Academy Management Perspectives by Porter and Seagull-Cow, which develops their activity, you know, notions of complementarity within a complexity view, and starts really looking at linkages between activities. Now that I saw as actually, you know, moving a little bit forward, I think, in terms of, you know, integrating some of the, you know, complexity-based, complementary-based notions coming out of economics and, you know, knowledge-based approaches to the firm. So I think that, you know, this notion of creating a more integrated approach to the firm, which within the strategic management area, I think there's still a lot of potential left there for doing it.
You don't mention the word learning here. How do you see the role of organizational learning in this context?
Does that have anything to do with fitness landscapes?
Say merge is underlying or learning?
I don't know. I feel that organizational learning, I think, has been too much, it seems to me to have been too much identified with, or it's seen as an analogy to individual learning. And I think, you know, ideas of double loop learning and so on, it's seeing it as similar things. Whereas I think the interesting thing about organizational learning is, you know, what does this mean for the kinds of processes that are going on here? So I would say that, you know, that what I think a focus upon capabilities and what underlies those capabilities whether we call them routines or whether we call them processes. I think I prefer processes because it's something that we can identify and map within organizations. I would say that this is where you're going to see organizational learning occurring, and seeing the nature of well, how do you accelerate this? What is the roles of experimentation? What is the roles of best practice transfer and so on?
I think you stressed that very nicely in the beginning of your speech. You said it's an epistemological issue here. We have to be a little bit philosophical when we discuss a theory. And knowing is an ongoing thing, and it may not be there without learning. So learning is part of the process and preconceived, but it's not. Learning is not enough to make knowledge and to make knowledge travel. You may debate that or argue and say there are different relations, but you have to have a clear epistemological understanding of your theory or your view. And I think that's what you said initially. So the learning theories are important on science March in the tradition also of Herbert Scheinman. But I think when you look at the reviews being done in the 2000, they just sort of say, well, this work is important, but it's the next step to discuss the knowledge issues of the firm.
Yeah, I go back to but I think on this learning, I think I got an uneasy feeling, because I feel a lot of the learning stuff, it seems to be, there seems to be an underlying ideology that learning is a good thing, whereas learning is an extremely expensive thing, particularly for individuals. So I think one of the keys here is, I think these sort of notions of efficiency. How can you develop organizational capability in an efficient way that avoids all this sort of ideology that individuals need to share knowledge all the time. Most organizations, knowledge sharing is going on all the time, but most of it is dysfunctional stuff like gossip or complaining about the administration, things like that. So I think the key, again, is focusing this, and I think again the need for empirical studies. I would say some of the work on I think of the papers by Gary Pisano and co-authors on stuff on minimally invasive cardiac surgery. There I think you've got some real insight in terms of how do you structure a team in order to accelerate organizational learning. And I think that's the kind of stuff that I think is found very valuable. Is the stuff that really comes out of those deep empirical studies. Yeah.
Just because you were just connecting the complexity of your search with the production function.
Yeah.
So that basically would, in my understanding, sort of result in some sort of awareness, which becomes then more of sort of an operationalized view on what is the learning in the organizational context. Because you have a lot of search activities and you have the existing production activities. The question is, how do you transform your existing production activities to match what is needed in the future? And for that you have to have some sort of a process. And do we call that the learning, or what do we call it?
Well,
I don't know.
The piece that we wrote about knowledge access is maybe an answer to that question. And the point about the knowledge access thing was that the organization doesn't have to learn in order to transform inputs into outputs. You can borrow knowledge from someone else. Arguably, they don't learn anything. They just borrow the knowledge and do it. So that may be part of the solution. Is that right?
Well, yeah, except now it seems we're moving, and all these things are so influenced by fashion and imitation. So the dominant notions of organization, both within firms and between firms, it's been very much, I think, influenced by notions of modularity, loose coupled systems, standardized interfaces, and so on. And this has been consistent with the whole outsourcing and development of inter-firm networks and so on. Well, now it seems we're going into reverse, and it seems to be driven very much by the fact that the market value of Apple is now I don't know, equivalent to the GDP of the European Union or something like this. And so, you know, now, you know, we're all saying, it's integration that's the key, and you know, integration, you know, between hardware and software, and that's the bandwagon that all firms are leaping on now. So I think that the trend is going, I think, you know, much more maybe back into organizational learning in terms of encompassing this you know, this vast array of knowledge and finding internal systems that can, you know, have that remarkable scope to be able to integrate across such a wide array of different types of specialized knowledge, and certainly, you know, that's something we don't know really much about. You know that you know, I mean, it seems from most of the sort of knowledge-based principles that there ought to be limits on the capacity of firms to be able to integrate across, you know, massive arrays of different knowledge of very different types. So I think there's certainly a lot to be done on that, uncovered on that internal side of integration within firms.
I think sometimes we forget that the biggest knowledge advantage is actually how to be industry. It's a bigger idiosyncratic knowledge advantage between industries, how to make cars and airplanes than making airplanes or cars within a particular industry. And it's so obvious we tend to forget that. And of course the industry is where you can structure your value chain. And what you just said would be my definition of the firm. Where does it end and where does it start from a knowledge-based view of the perspective? It's where you can't extend your knowledge to make a profit anymore. That's the demarcation lines of the firm, but it will also be the demarcation line of the industry, because at a certain point you can't make the car fly.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, you know, one of the implications of a knowledge-based approach is you should define knowledge on the, you should define industries on the basis of knowledge, and I think that, you know, what we're seeing then, of course, is that industry boundaries then start becoming very fluid as the knowledge basis of industries changes, and you know, and firms may make really sort of fundamental errors. You know, I think, you know, one of the fundamental errors of Kodak was actually believing that there was some kind of industry some digital imaging industry, whereas there isn't. You know, this is just part of information processing, hardware, software, and so on. The images are no different from any other kind of, you know, fundamentally, or no different from any other kind of digital representation of communication, whether it's images, speech, data, whatever. So I think, you know, once we start getting, you know, using a knowledge-based approach, I think we probably want to start thinking about redrawing industries, or we could use this as a very different way of classifying industries than, you know, either on the basis of demand-supply substitution, which is the economic approach, or, you know, what the approaches that we see in the standard industrial classifications.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what you just said about Kodak and the mistake you believe it made in terms of digital imaging, what it might have done in a different way and perhaps not had this outcome?
Well, I guess, you know, I mean, the remarkable thing about Kodak was it saw the disruptive technology and its implications incredibly early.
Yeah,
it avoided nearly all the errors that Clay Christensen has talked about, and was a pioneer of digital imaging.
Right.
But where they were caught, I think, within their cognitive framework, was believing that there was some, you know, it wasn't a photographic, it wasn't being a photographic industry, it was an imaging, there would still be an imaging kind of industry somehow. But once we move to taking digital images with sensors, we don't need cameras so much, you know, as devices anymore. We don't need specialized printers, if we want the image printed. Basically, we're into monitors, we're into software, we're into algorithms for data compression and so on. There is no digital imaging industry, or if there is, it's already been dominated by Microsoft, Adobe, Canon, Hewlett-Packard, and so on.
In some of our discussions about learning, the word capabilities came up a number of times. And one reason this was interesting is that a number of the questions that we got from the audience related to this relationship between RBV, dynamic capabilities, and the knowledge-based view. And a lot of questions were about how they overlap. And for some people, there was a question of whether knowledge was a specific type of resource. And for some other people, it was sort of the other way around. And so the questions we had were, where are the overlaps? And where are they distinct?
Okay, so at one level, knowledge is probably the most important resource of the firm, and particularly interesting because of its strategic characteristics. So to that extent, it's a subset. On the other hand, I think in terms of what are these approaches trying to do, the resource-based view, I think, is very much a broadened view of the asset base of the firm, which is then trying to say what are the assets that are going to be are going to offer competitive advantage. So the sense in which the knowledge-based view, I think, is broader is that it's giving us insight into what goes on in terms of actually putting resources together. So the overlap, I think, comes with the concept of organizational capability. So I think that what organizational capability allows, although it is it's a latent variable, it's an unobservable construct, but what it does allow, I think, is to be able to, in effect, I think the organizational capability is the manifestation of the knowledge of the firm. It's the capacity of the firm to undertake functions, tasks, and so on. So I think by focusing upon organizational capability, what this, I think, allows us to do is to see, well, what is it that knowledge is doing, and I think allows us to have something a bit more tangible to base our empirical work on than simply talking about what is the knowledge of the firm, which is which is impossible to either define, measure, or classify.
I think we made it a bit too complicated by this capability research stream, because it already resides in Goossen and others' definition of the knowledge-based view of the firm. Is the combinatory capability of the assets we have or may acquire or develop. So the combinatory capability is the essence of any dynamic capability that you may specify. So I think I suggested that this David Keys and Bruce and Udo team up and figure out how to organize the dialogue with the same type of terms, or at least explain each other. It's just overlapping.
Sure, but the problem remains. What the hell is a dynamic? Where do you identify? Where do you see a dynamic capability? And I think again, this is the problem of the whole area. I think we've got so, I think, infatuated with concepts and theories that ultimately, if we can't actually bring these down to empirically identifiable phenomena, I think we're going to be going on about, arguing about what is a dynamic capability, and is a dynamic capability different from a combinative capability, and I don't think it's actually going to get us anywhere. I think that the valuable stuff is to say, well, let's try to say, well, what are let's get some sort of categorization. It's dynamic capabilities. Must be something about new product development capabilities, about research capabilities, about new business development capabilities, and actually let's start getting into understanding the basis of these.
But I think that's what I'm criticizing, because we're so much down into the developing and understanding what this is that we miss the big picture. It needs to be firm. I mean, we have a lot of dynamic rigidity too, but we haven't discussed that so much as the dynamic capabilities. So as I say, I think there are too many terms, and instead if you can clarify when you speak about the same thing and not only speak about empirical evidence without tying it to theory, because there are good theories and you're part of developing that. So.
I think some of what this discussion is bringing up is that there are a lot of really interesting new directions that we can take this, and in terms of overlaps, relationships with other types of literatures, there's a lot of questions that are interesting for the future. But given what we've talked about and sort of this expansiveness that we've got into, one question that was a bit provocative, but was, can we still talk about the knowledge-based view as such? And in particular, when we discussed this, some of the things we were saying was that, that we might not be able to talk about a knowledge-based view as such, but about all the different streams that it's gone into. And so I was wondering maybe you could elaborate on these different streams and how they've been enriched by the knowledge-based view, and how they can continue to be in the future.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that the knowledge-based view has remained a perspective has not provided a coherent, it cannot provide it cannot become a theory of the firm, because a theory is something that can generate empirically refutable predictions. A theory which is based upon knowledge, if we can't define what knowledge is, then we can't, almost by definition, generate empirical, or it becomes extreme. Well, maybe you can. It becomes pretty difficult. So I think it's remained a view, which is why I think again, as I'm saying, that these I think are some of the points that you've listed up here. I guess which I guess I jumped ahead in my earlier comments. I think are things that really I think offer a lot of potential for future work. I think, well, not new direction, but old direction. I think the whole area of organisational capability is, I think, one where the knowledge-based view, I think, is it's inherent within that phenomena, where I think there is there's a lot of I think on this, say knowledge-based view and organisation design. I think the whole issue of processes, right back to the nitty-gritty bits of organisation design, is a whole area that there isn't a tremendous amount of work being done. You look back at the work of people like Brian Pentland, documenting consumer support processes in a software firm. His work with Feldman. In looking at sort of very basic and familiar things like academic hiring processes. I think these are this is the kind of nitty-gritty stuff. The work that was done by Narduzzo and colleagues on setting up wireless base stations by Telecom Italia. These kinds of studies, I think, are the kinds of nitty-gritty stuff that are really allowing us to look at some of these real building blocks, I would say, of organisation design. And then I think the next issue then is, if processes are the basis of this, then how are processes to be housed within organisational units? What are some of the linkages between those organisational units? Which of course draws upon a lot of the issues of modularity, the design of management systems to link modules. So yeah, I think that I think it's a lot of interesting stuff to do. I don't think our work's done yet. I don't think we can say it's done. Let's not have any more conferences.
That gives us hope for the future, at least. And we also looked at the managerial implications. So what is the relevance of KBV for practice? And one of the things you pointed out is, okay, we academics talk about KBV, and in practice we often talk about knowledge management. What do you see? What are the relations between these two?
Well, to some extent, I think that maybe they've sort of grown somewhat apart in that I think I think in both the academic side and the practical side of knowledge management, the key recognition was the role of tacit knowledge. That firms were managing information systems without any, and I think, but a lot of the knowledge management stuff, I mean, it's essentially common. It doesn't need any theory. Most of it's sort of common sense stuff. Just sort of very basic things like that. Most firms have headcount limits, so that in order to hire anybody into a job, the previous person has got to leave. Leave with all their bloody knowledge. You cannot, in many organisations, you cannot have an overlap period. And I mean, a lot of these things in knowledge management are just so simple. If knowledge is tacit, if knowledge is primarily tacit, difficult to transfer, how do you actually, are people who need that knowledge, how can they contact the people, how do they identify? All these sort of very simple basic things like having corporate yellow pages and so on, of designated knowledge experts. All these things I think are just, they're elementary aspects of elementary aspects of knowledge. I think once you develop a lot of the other areas of linkage of knowledge-based approaches to organisation design, to capabilities, then I think that opens up a whole new area. But typically, it's going beyond what has been traditionally seen as knowledge management, and maybe knowledge management needs to go. The whole notion of a chief knowledge officer is a bit bonkers, because what else is there to manage? Widgets don't need a lot of management. I mean, knowledge management is management. I mean, there isn't anything else.
Okay, so in your opinion, knowledge management was a way to practical implementation of the concept of knowledge-based view of the firm, too specific. Now, we have now the knowledge-based view of the firm way more expanded. What are other implications for management on that side? And one of the things you pointed out was modularity, but you also pointed out Apple, which is actually the opposite of modularity.
Changes in sort of today's world, how do they affect the
Yeah.
way that we see these in terms of knowledge base?
Let's ask somebody else, because
I think a very important question for managers
Yeah.
about knowledge management today is this question about global food,
yeah.
which actually puts you in a perspective where the organization is interconnected with the universities and also has sort of a regional sort of perspective.
Yeah.
And this becomes very complicated.
Yeah.
And I think that would be one of the main areas where we have the sort of the knowledge-based view. If there would be some stronger theoretical foundations, could give some guidance. How do we really configure knowledge in a dynamic?
I think, and I think, again, coming back to your earlier point on organizational learning, I think, again, a knowledge-based approach, I think it has changed a lot of our ideas about, what are the benefits of certain types of strategy. So, if I think of our notions of multinational enterprises, increasingly, I think this notion that the real benefit of multinationality is not so much exploiting scale economies in either production or product development. What it's much more about is the capacity of a firm which is multinational to accelerate its rate of evolution, because it has this opportunity for genetic enhanced capacity for genetic mutation because it is in a wide number of different environments. I think, again, I think this is giving a somewhat different perspective and allows us to understand things that don't really make any sense. Is why is it that the world brewery industry is now dominated by 4 firms, whereas the optimal scale for a brewery is quite small, even for the modern ones. It's got to be about this capacity to transfer learnings across borders. And the knowledge-based view does not provide clear sort of answers to this, but I think it raises the questions, it raises the issues. Yeah. no.
It's a big pathology.
Well, it would be a pathology if it was a source of a source of failure, a source of in which in some industries it has been. In retail banking, I would say that all this international expansion, we've got to be in China, we've got to be in Eastern Europe and so on. I think because the firms did not develop the capacity to actually implement and share knowledge, transfer best practices, and then for most of them, maybe HSBC, maybe Banco Santander are exceptions to this. It has been a pathology. But if you look at an industry which, I always say, well, if you're looking for a simple industry to get into, cement, cement is low value. It only makes sense to be a local producer of this, and say, well, hang on, now the world is dominated by 4 major cement producers. Where the hell are the benefits of cross-border integration? Then I think this is opening a whole area in terms of understanding how these firms have achieved this. Well, I mean, the case is on Cemex. I think look into this in terms of transferring of superior processes. The same with SAB Miller and its breweries. It has a team that goes round on production, on brand positioning, and basically, the firm is acting as an internal knowledge market to a great extent. So I think that I think this has allowed us to actually be able to help firms to uncover where a lot of these benefits may lie.
In your view, what might Kodak have done? If we accept that
you must have held shares in Kodak.
No, I had a good friend that worked for me,
okay.
and that's why. Going into printers and cameras was a bad idea. Should they have gone into telephone with photographic imaging? I mean, what could they have done? You think?
Well, the capacity. I think one of the things we know about capabilities is that they're fundamentally rooted in values, in behavioral norms, in cognitive frameworks and so on. They should have stuck with chemicals. Eastman Chemical is still a successful company. They sold off. They should have applied their chemical, their knowledge of and their polymer knowledge.
Sure.
To, I don't know, cosmetics, things like this. So I think that sticking to their capabilities would have been a much better way. And if they were going to go into digital imaging, I think stick with the industries where they could use their existing resource. Stick with governmental applications, the commercial side. I mean, on like magazine printing, that's still a massive market. But I think this focus upon the consumer was I think that really took them into an area where one, there's no real distinct digital imaging market, and one which is so violently competitive.
Right.
They're competing with firms that are giving stuff away.
I'm running out of time here, so unfortunately we have to round it. First of all, I would say a big thanks to Professor Brand that he is here to present his view on the knowledge-based view to us.
Oh, thank you very much.
And second of all, a big applause to you. First of all, thanks for submitting the questions in advance. And second of all, thanks for showing up. We were discussing how many people will there be. It's Sunday, 8 o'clock, maybe 10,
I know,
maybe. But it turns out to be a wonderful audience that actively participates. Thanks to you all.
And thanks
Thanks,
also
Gabriel.
to Gabriel.